go to TV, and then we'll go to the PPPR1. Let's have some portion of the time, perhaps 30 minutes each, for each high-level meeting theme. And then within that 30 minutes, go through, intelligence sharing, what's already happening, where, at what stage is the political declaration at the moment, in terms of finalizing, in terms of drafting, in terms of negotiations. And then we're going to dive into the latest drafts of the statement themselves. And then we already began as the ACASO team to identify areas that we could recommend as either aligned with our regional statement or unaligned with the regional statement in terms of areas and positions of member states that are already coming along in each of the outcome documents for us to either support, for us to support, to oppose, or for us to think about. We won't be able to do this as civil society, but what we mean is for us to support, oppose, or reflect on as civil society to push to our member states and to our capitals. So that's really the plan. And again, this is part of the over or longer term objective of making sure that at the end of this high-level meeting processes in September and after September, we would have as strong as possible outcome declarations for each of the high-level meetings on UHC, TV, and PPPR. Okay, if we're fine, I don't think we should go anymore into individual introductions, but I would encourage everyone, if you want to introduce yourself. I think everybody knows each other from Jakarta, but you could also type in the chat just to say hi to people, reintroduce yourself if you want to. But otherwise, what we could do, I would pause for now in terms of if anybody has a question in terms of the intent for this call so far. So it's 2 o'clock in Bangkok right now. We aim to finish by 4. We would go through each of the high-level meeting outcome document drafts one by one, and then whatever time we have left out of those, after those 3, we want to have a discussion in terms of where we go from here. How do we push? Where do we push for our positions? Yeah. If I see no raised hands as well as nobody coming to the mic, let's take up Yoichi for now. Jen would provide like an overview of her reading so far, status quo of the Yoichi, and then we'll take it from there. Over to you, Jen.
Thanks, RD. And before I start, I just want to preface it by saying—
Jen, I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me? Is this better?
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. I'm working from swing office today, so we're making do. But just before I start my presentation, as RD say, what I will do is provide an overall comment on my reading of the declaration, but to also know that when I was doing this review over the weekend last week, that I was looking at the mark draft, the 0 draft, and last night we received the markup draft, and I haven't had a chance to look at that, but I think RD will be providing her comments on the markup draft at that after my overall presentation. So let me just give my overall impression and reading of the 0 draft before the member state comments came in last night. Let me see this. Okay. So just again, right, as I just mentioned, this was the unmarked political declaration that I reviewed. But to also know that in terms of the perspective and the lens that I used in my reading, a couple reference and comments that I looked at as well. And those included our statement from Jakarta, but then I also looked at the comments that were released from CSAM, UHC 2030, their civil society feedback. Again, that was before the member states' comments on the draft that we all saw. And then also from our partners, colleagues, United for Global Mental Health. Last week, they also released their reading of the 0 draft and their comments on those. go to the next slide. So just in terms of like what was reflected in the zero draft against our regional statement on the, I'm just going to throw some keywords out there that, you know, that reflected in both our statement, but also in the zero draft. So there were mentioning of health needs of individuals, so people center. There are languages around equality in the zero draft as well as the whole of society approach, which was really peppered through the zero draft. In terms of specific to our statement and our key asks on the 3 HLM, there were quite a lot of similarities in terms of, you know, like languages around ensuring quality, ensuring accessibility, affordability, you know, in the UHC zero draft statement, as well as in our own statement. This emphasis on, you know, there should not be any financial hardship for people to access the health services they need. Languages around, again, equality, the whole society approach. Quite a few statements talked about being inclusive. What was really nice to see was they were mentioning of integration of mental health services as well in the draft. Policies and programs needing to be evidence-based. There were a couple places where gender equality was mentioned as well as human rights. And I'll go into a little bit detail on those elements in the next few slides. There was a section on exploring innovative financing mechanism. The zero draft also talked about inadequate health workforce as reflected in our statement. And also they were mentioning of the role of community health workers, mentioning of accountability about programs, health services needing to be community based, being part of the service system, and also again innovating innovative financing. So those are just some of those are the similarities and of like languages that reflect that were in our statement that were also reflected in the zero draft. What I'll go through in the next few slides are just some of the key gaps that I noticed, and I thought that would be good for groups' attention. And again, this is before the member state comments came in. So human rights, while it was really great to see, you know, they were mentioning of human rights in the statement, in the declaration, there were only really two like paragraphs that it show up on PPA and the operating paragraph on 13. And one was relating to health as an investment that could promote human rights. And the second one, it's related to mental health. What I had done earlier was then to point out other areas where we might want to push the inclusion of human rights languages, including under OP4, which was a statement relating to national health in all policies, national ownership, and also under 23, which is around access to medicines and technologies. And there was, what was really interesting to see was the section on innovation and digital technology, which completely like devoided of any mentioning of human rights issue or safety issue of patients relating to data protection and privacy. So that's the other area that I thought we would want to have a more detailed look in terms of ensuring that there are human rights related languages in. On gender equality, they're mentioned in, as you can see on the slide, there were a couple of places where gender equality was mentioned. But the impression throughout the document was that it was really mentioned in the context of women and girls. And so from my, and you know, reflecting on our statement, I think what we really want to promote is the language around, you know, inclusion with gender diversity. And I pointed out also, I think OP15, which talks about mainstreaming a gender perspective, would be a good place. If there's one area in the declaration we want to have this language inserted, that would be a key area. Again, I mentioned that there were a number of places where it mentioned about community-based, community-level services. I think, and many of you are aware of this, I think we also want to really push around, like make a point about these services. They could be community-based, they could be community-level, but we also want to go the extra step about services being community-led when appropriate and whenever possible. On health emergency preparedness, there was a section on this relating to pandemic preparedness as well. And in the draft under OP40, it talks about, somewhat what it means by health system. And what it's missing, it's like you can see, it talks about primary health care, it talks about referral system, essential public health functions. There needs to be an inclusion of community system as well, but also I think under this section, really the need to institutionalize mechanisms that would promote and facilitate community and CS participations and engagement. They were, again, as I mentioned earlier, while it was really nice and encouraging to see languages around, health services, engagement need to be inclusive, hold a society approach, and it has languages around vulnerable population, but it doesn't go beyond of what it means by these words, and especially around
Last
vulnerable
question, Jen. How
population.
many slides? Oh, sorry. How many slides?
Two more.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Yeah, and then and especially on vulnerable population, I think we really need to push the language around inclusion of populations that are stigmatized and criminalized as well. And lastly, what was a bit interesting to see was there was not a clear alignment between what we have learned, experienced from COVID-19 and taking those lessons and to really reflect in what are we asking in the declaration, especially around medicine, access to medicine. It talks about the use of voluntary licensing, which for our region, that mechanism just didn't work. And that was really the one, access to medicine mechanism that it talks about in that paragraph. And there's also a missing connection in that section, on what this all means. Under global health financing, connecting it to the global PPPR plan and fund. And also, I think there needs to be somewhere for us to talk about long COVID care as well, coming off on pandemic. And that's currently not in the zero draft. So lastly, my other point, it's under national health spending, noting that developing and least developed countries' budget have been severely devastated by COVID. I think we need to take this opportunity to push for a more concrete global commitment to increase contribution to global health aids, pushing the point about this should not come in the form of loans, and also, and taking from USC 2030's actions agenda, I think, to promote and to push for at least 5% or more of GDP investment in the public health spending. So this is my last slide, RD, but maybe this is a good place to transition to you, because this was based on my initial reading of priority advocacy area that we should look at, but I will turn the floor back over to you on the current draft that you just received last night. Thanks, RD.
Thanks, Jen. And APCASO team is really trying to catch up with all the developments that are happening in terms of the outcome document drafting. So as we've said, as of maybe 12 hours, 15 hours earlier, we've received a leaked copy of the compilation text of the latest universal health coverage political declaration for the 2023 HLM. And it is, I mean, thanks Jen for all that overview analysis. But as every time that the partners actually come to us and ask us like what language that they can go to their member states or their capitals for lobbying, it's always like our experience is that it's always best to engage with the actual commented text of the actual political declaration, the latest copy. So we would go to that very, very soon. What we tried to do within APCASO, because for TB and for UHC, we already have copies of the texts that are marked with the comments of the member states. PPPR is still zero draft. Like it was just released this week. So I think the member states are just beginning to incorporate their comments on it. It hasn't been leaked yet. We will be happy to share with you. Maybe don't source APCASO as the source, but we'll be happy to share with you, because what we did is try to go into the latest compilation text and then try to match color coding in green, the paragraphs or sections or language suggestions within the latest version of the draft that has the biggest alignment from our statement. And we would recommend strongly support, absolutely support, push this with your government contacts wherever they are. The blue is, the black are the ones that these are detrimental. These are really against the principles of what we agreed in the Jakarta joint statement. And then there's yellow. Yellow are the ones that good to support, but we don't have to die for them. The greens are okay, this is good. But as we go, just to also note that for UHC, I only had access to it when I opened my inbox this morning. I was trying to cram to finish reviewing and to finish the color coding marking by the time of this meeting. It's 44 pages. It's hard to do. I've only reached page 7, but we'll share it as a live document with everybody so that as we commit to finish it as soon as possible, probably tonight or tomorrow, people could see and they could even add. But for us to maybe as a guidance, because you would see a lot of these letters in each of the draft, I think it would be good to have a one-on-one. So you would see later, and you have probably seen already versions, iterations, text of the outcome document, including with the marked suggestions from each of the member state countries or regional blocks or country blocks. So PP would be sections of the outcome document. That means preambular paragraph. So preamble is not operational. These are mostly principles, background into why the member states are going to make their positions later on, and their targets and goals, which will be expressed in the OP. OP means operational paragraph. So the PP is like, oh, this is what we subscribe to. These are the former political declarations that are the basis for this text. These are the motherhood statements, the principles which we all subscribe to, that all of the operational paragraphs would actually align with. So it's important. The OP are the how-to, the objectives, the commitments, the specific commitments, the operationalization. How do the countries, member states of the UN that are part of this high-level meeting for these particular topics intending or committing to achieve the preambular paragraphs or their goals and commitments. So those are the main sections. So you would have that. And it would be in UN language, so you would have a lot of recalling, committing, recognizing, a lot of that. But when it comes to the negotiation, and you would see this later, you would see a lot of these words. Del means delete. So it could be like, okay, CANS, which is Canada, New Zealand, Australia, is suggesting to delete those paragraphs that are in bracket. So the original text as drafted by the Secretariat would be in black. The red portions are the ones that are being proposed as changes. There would be a lot of red because each member state or each block would have their own recommendations in terms of how to change. So delete is, delete a particular word or a particular section or a particular set of words. Add is to add a new paragraph, language, word, apostrophe, S, plural to the draft that didn't exist in the zero draft. Alt is an alternative suggestion. So we don't want to delete, we don't want to add to it, but the entity, the country or the bloc proposing wants to provide or to suggest an alternate phrasing of the paragraph. You would also find, OP1, and then you would put this. If it says OP1 out, this means an alternative suggestion for this operational paragraph, so and so number. If you put there OP1 bis, that means a subparagraph, a suggestion to add a subparagraph within a paragraph. Ter is a second subparagraph. What is a fourth subparagraph within a paragraph? So just for us to unpack a bit of a 101, I think that's mainly it. Let's jump to the actual text. Oh no, this part, Jeff. I think this is important. Yeah. So an overview for, again, like our very brief, as far as we can, cramming reading of the UHC compilation draft. There's a lot of contentions, because this is not the first political declaration on universal health coverage. This is like there was an earlier political declaration. The contentions are the ones that are actually interesting and for us to watch on, aside from the areas which we feel are missing that we should make sure won't be missed in this UHC declaration. So SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights, not surprising, in any outcome document or any high-level meeting, a lot of member states, particularly the Vatican, Iran, like really die. This is the hill that they die on, on sexual and reproductive health and rights. Gender is always marked red. Member states, and I would put like the ones that are in green, the most progressive are in EU, CANS, which is Canada, Australia, New Zealand. US this time, they have a progressive government. Mexico is performing very well. And I'm so proud from the region, Pakistan. At a number, not so many comments, not so active. I've reached page 7. I've encountered 2 recommendation languages from Pakistan so far, but both of them are very sharp, both of them are very progressive, and both of them, they're the only ones championing the language. And it has to do with human rights and recognizing of vulnerable populations. And to us, like, okay, Pakistan is suddenly on our map of countries to watch out for. The block here, the one in blacks are the naughty countries. HS is the Holy See. This is the Vatican. This is the Vatican does have a seat because the Vatican is a country. And Iran, they usually tandem together or they split, and they would always have backward language, or they would oppose progressive language on SRHR, gender, human rights. They never want to put services. For example, if it's health services, sexual and reproductive health services, they would rather put care, because care could be more general. It doesn't have to be particular services. I've noticed also Iran and the Holy See tend to block and oppose all languages that have to do with, age appropriate or gender appropriate. Human rights, of course, and key and vulnerable populations is severely, like a number of countries are fighting for it, but this is like one of the biggest contentions. And we know that this is the reason behind this is because some some member states that don't have the same position actually don't want to recognize the existence of, for example, people who use drugs, sex workers, like they only want the nice populations. There's a number of paragraphs you would see later in red that proposes domestic financing. This is being promoted by the EU, and we hope that there will be support from our region actually. I put here in blue the countries in our region that I feel, aside from Pakistan, have so far contributed. We're not so active. Like Japan is, because they see UHC, they have a lot of reference to age appropriate because they have a lot of concern in terms of the issues of aging in the context of UHC. It's not Indochina. It's India and China. Nothing, I mean, to me, and you would have a chance to see it later, nothing so bad, nothing so good. Like sometimes my comment is question mark. What do you mean about it? Indonesia has a reference. They're promoting language and globalization, support for globalization. So Yeah, Vietnam is like a question mark also for me, like a language that they have a particular paragraph that they would that they are. So this is just the overall. Yeah, so just in terms of like for me, when I was trying to mark the draft document, I always look for the most strong in terms of position, in terms of gender, human rights. I always see as EU, and then CANS is a bit like okay, not so bad, but can be strengthened. EU is the best. But let's see, Mexico has been doing fabulously. The others are quiet, and our region is mostly quiet except for one or two comments individually from countries. Everybody has to know, for those who are familiar, all the countries, most of the countries in our region belong to the group of 77, G77. The way that EU negotiates as a bloc, there's no individual, there's no individual Italy or France because they always come under EU. G77 isn't negotiating as a bloc. It's very interesting. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. We also are not seeing Cuba, which is supposed to lead G77 active in UHC. And again, maybe it's good or maybe it's bad. But there's a lot of things that we could do as a region to contribute to a stronger political declaration for UHC. Jeff, if I can just go to the actual text itself. Yeah, so this is how, I hope you're able to see this. This is the wonderful world of the of the text negotiation. Yeah. So as I was saying, there's preambular paragraphs, the ones which I felt we could let go of, let the countries argue on it, they could handle it. I didn't put any highlighter. The ones, and this would be done across the 3 HLM political declaration drafts. This would also be the coding for TV. Because again, like we want a lot of language, but if the member states are already putting in language, the most that we can do and the most strategic that we could do is for our countries either to introduce countries in our region, if we could lobby them to introduce missing language that supports very important, issues, paragraphs, positions that are missing, or support the language of other countries or other blocs that are already there. That definitely, because if it's only coming from developed regions or from developing countries, it would not be as strong as when our region or countries in our region or specifically developing countries actually add in their voice and say we also support this paragraph. So I mean, it's hard. It's 44 pages. But Brazil, I mean, I don't know how to. So the first one, PP1, we are supporting, or we suggest as APCASO to support the alternative language being proposed by Brazil because it's stronger than the original one. It's recalling a WHO constitution that says that the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health, etc., includes physical, mental, and social well-being. It is a stronger statement than the original PP1. There's a Japan intervention here that I put in black because it says quality assured. I think assured waters down the notion of quality. Like we need to have quality services rather than just quality assured. A lot of fear, like I have peppered because our joint statement from the region across the 3 HLMs, the overarching theme are gender responsiveness, gender transformation, human rights basis, people-centeredness, equity. So a lot of the most progressive language that we could find related to gender, human rights, community involvement, we supported. So here, there's a number of recommendations. We supported the one that is recommended by EU CANS to add gender and age responsive. EU is very good in terms of using human-centered, people-centered. It aligns very well with our statement. This one is an additional paragraph, sub-paragraph that has been recommended by UK. And it's good because this is the paragraph which actually accommodates the recommendation in our statement to mention the interaction, the need for consideration of TB and PPR within UHC program services and interventions. So this has been added. It would be good for the countries of our region to support it. And just to let you know that this would be a like a quick go through. There is a reference that the EU was proposing to add again to include inclusiveness and equitable. We think that that would strengthen the language and it's aligned with our statement. So we're proposing absolute support for that. Mexico proposed to add information rather than services to essential health services and information, and then including, yeah, I mean, it's good to say quality medicines, not only medicines, but also health products and commodities. So you would see that Iran opposes. We should oppose the opposition of Iran, and we should support the addition of, when there is a reference to access to quality medicines, we should also put products and commodities as much as we can. There's limited time. The next one is still on paragraph PPP, preambular paragraph 9. This is the reference to communities and populations that face multiple intersecting forms of discrimination, including women and girls. Iran opposes the mention of this. It's important because if it's not there, then that means like it's almost erasing the identity and the reality that there are vulnerable populations in the countries, not only of our region, but also of the world. And there are also like vulnerable populations, vulnerable communities that need particular attention. They need to be recognized and they need to be supported. And Iran and the Holy See, and that's actually even in the TB1, no? They want to always strike that out. I put this in blue. This is the one from Indonesia that I said like, okay, I don't know what we feel about it, but I was just highlighting any time that a country from our region does an intervention. This is the globalization paragraph of Indonesia. And it's interesting. I was like, I'm worried of globalization. And then they continue with that benefits all people in society. So I don't know the track. If we have Indonesian colleagues here, let us know where this is coming from. But Indonesia seems to be there. It's the only language that is around this, which is very, very curious. I think for now, we don't have to alienate Indonesia. We could leave it as it is. This one, EU, and this is consistent throughout. They introduce language on the role of domestic resources for financing UHG. But they're not so bad because they also introduce language on and acknowledging the inadequate level of financing, not just domestic, but all levels of financing for UHG. So they call that out, but they also mention the need for stepping out domestic resource mobilization for UHG. And I think like that aligns with our statement. No, our statement calls for, our civil society statement for Asia Pacific calls for stepping up financing and at the same time specifically domestic financing for UHG, TB, and PPPR. Here again, rights-based and gender responsive. This is EU, and you would see here Iran, and China. Oh, I didn't note that. This is tagging with Iran on opposing that. So again, EU wants addition on gender. So Brazil is adding, and I think this is very good, a sub-paragraph that recognizes the interrelationship between poverty and other social and economic determinants of health.
They are saying that the one that's now in Indonesia is the continuation of the Indonesia G20 Global Health Agenda.
So Indonesia is really supporting globalization and a global health agenda.
It's the continuation of the G20 Global Health Agenda.
But if it's actually taken out of context, it's like confusing. Like to me, globalization in itself is a very loaded word. So if it's actually not connected to previous agreements, it's like, oh, Indonesia is for globalization. So a number here. Okay, so there's again like EU, like restrictive and discriminatory. They want to add the recognition of the importance of equitable, socially just social protection mechanisms, as well as the elimination of the root causes of discrimination, and restrictive and discriminatory laws, policies, and practices, stigma, and multiple intersecting forms of discrimination. And then Iran wants to add care to quality health care. That makes it like, okay, care, what is care? We have to push for actual services. we have to put for, like, because care could be like, okay, we care about this, but there's no counterpart program, there's no counterpart financing, and it's been a strategy of Iran and non-progressive member states to always put care in these kinds, not just for UHE, but for all services. So just a lot of this. Oh, I noted here, although we didn't have any statement, any section in our statement on climate change, I feel we just support EU in the reference to effects of climate change. They wanted to delete natural disasters, natural and natural disasters, and I agree, because there's no natural disasters. All disasters are human-made because of the greed, irresponsibility of human beings. So I think that's where they're coming from. More references that are being added by CANS on gender, age responsive. Pakistan is pushing for recognition of developing countries as often the most affected by climate change. So addition, that's a very strong. There's here Japan that talks about the previous meeting that they had. I would just go through this because I want to go to TV and then PPPR. And again, this is not complete. I'm just looking for the particular language from Pakistan that I said I was so happy about. PP 19. I would look for it. What it's actually, is it up?
Yeah, is it 19?
What is the code for Pakistan? PAC? PAK?
Yeah.
I mark it. Oh, there's a lot, but these are earlier. I marked, hold on, sorry. I'm wanting to, yeah, there's one reference. I think it's PP 12. Pakistan. Yeah, here. So they wanted to add that the advancement of and protection of human rights of those that are stigmatized and discriminated is crucial to the attainment of universal health coverage. That's coming from the region, that's coming from Pakistan. They're the only proponents of that language. It's actually very powerful because it references both human rights as well as, the most stigmatized and discriminated population. And I think that has to be very, 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 very much supported. Vietnam added some language which to me can be let go of, can be supported. Doesn't change the context as far as I understand it is concerned. Yep, I think I would pause here because open for questions. We could allot 10 minutes. And as I've said, I've only reached page 7. There's still more than 30 pages to go. We'll continue to go through it. And basically, we're working on the draft that's already been commented by the member states. And what we'll do is just to work from this version, mark it as red, black, or yellow, and then have this as a version so that country partners who wish to, who intend to, and who are planning to mobilize and lobby with their capitals or with their member states, with their ministries of foreign affairs, or with their ministries of health, the relevant ministries, have something concrete to actually add. There's still a lot of space to influence the UHC political declaration because tomorrow, it's just the second reading and it doesn't close until the end of July. Thailand government has already reached to us. So far, we haven't done this, so we haven't given this our comments on this version, but we provided them the statement. But yeah, we will push wherever we can. I pause for now. Over. Questions, comments?
Yes. I wonder if there's any sense on the PP16 alt suggestion by Mexico. They're proposing to remove the subparagraphs with the statistics. This is from Ali Hassan.
I think I was reading through that. I didn't really engage because it's more of a practical comment. Like, do you want to provide statistics or not? It was not to me a substantive content. I do support removal because, like, you don't have to go into so many provision of facts. Another, like, that could be an attachment. You could have like an overarching. I think that was where Mexico is coming from, and I tend to take this position because throughout the commentaries of Mexico, it's consistent that they're actually supporting progressive language. To me, but I could stand to be corrected, and then I asked my colleagues if they would actually I think that's not our battle. Like we have other battles that we could fight for. There's like suggestions, like in the original draft, there's sub paragraphs that okay, there's like statistics, and Mexico is saying they delete the statistics, it's not needed here. It's more a practical journalistic, yeah. It's not a substantive one. Yep. Any other question?
There's another one. That's it.
Yep. Comments so far, how do you feel? Can I see a show of hands of those who have already engaged or, done the work connecting with the member state or the capitals? Oh, of course, Priya. Hi, Priya, for TB. And I hope we would, and we would, yeah, you unmuted. Priya, over to you.
Thanks, RD. I just wanted to say about the comment related to Mexico, and I just wanted to reflect on how the bloc is negotiating for the TB political declaration, and generally within the TB political declaration, we are also seeing that they are standing for progressive language. So just wanted to bring that comment here as well, that Mexico is coming out to be as an ally, generally for community-centric and human rights-based language.
Thanks, Priya. Yeah, and they're very progressive and they're also engaging a lot. Like Mexico, like you would have, like we're so proud of Indonesia because they're from the region, but I saw like a couple. But Mexico is engaging as heavily on an equal footing as EU, as CANS. Like if you're from Mexico, you should be proud. Yeah, but yeah, so far from how they're engaging, they're a country to ally with. Yeah. Anybody else? Comments, questions, confusions, concerns at the moment? And even from APASO colleagues, like it's good that there's already a reference on the interconnectors that need to look at UHC in the context of TB and PPPR as well. We should see how the operational paragraphs, or at least one operational paragraph, also supports that. I haven't gone, so apologies, it's too long. In Mangala's review of the TB one, like I didn't see if it's also happening here. She was saying that there's already, strong recommendations coming from certain member states to delete any and all references to Stop TB Partnership, to Global Fund, etc., etc. I would also try to see where we are at this point for UHC. If there's nothing, I don't see any hand raised. Oh, let me pause also. Is there any intelligence that any country partner would like to share? Japan, I see Japan here. I see Pakistan here. I would be very interested to actually hear where Pakistan is coming from in terms of these positions. Like I've engaged in a number of country processes for Pakistan, and I do note like the narrative of Pakistan government does support human rights and key populations, but it's fantastic to see it echoed at this level of a document. So yeah, any intelligence? Priya, India is not so, I mean, not to put you on the spot, or any other how they call this, Indian colleagues, and also Indonesia. Indonesia is quite quiet. I was expecting Indonesia to be more active. Japan is coming every now and there, but very strongly with their own personal agenda. Yeah, so any intelligence we're finding out from the countries. I also see here P. Orajit, anything that we're hearing also from? Thank you, Kat.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. For me, I mean myself, I have sent the zero draft to the chief advisor of MOPH, and he said that please have a letter to the permanent secretary of MOPH. So this is on the process. I mean, the CS Society, Thai CS Society would like to meet him also. So maybe I will try to let the Thai civil society meet him and feedback for the zero draft. And I also send the zero draft to the Dr. Jadet, Secretary General, and he already read, but not yet respond. This is just only my progress.
Thank you, P. Orajit. So, Dr. Yupadi, the secretary for others that are not from Thailand, she's the deputy secretary general of the National Health Security Office of Thailand, who we work with when we conducted the Jakarta meeting, has been actively reaching out in terms of language proposals that they could take as part of Thailand, considerations in the negotiation. So we haven't had access to this because she was reaching out like earlier, but we would be happy to work with Piorajit and the Thai Civil Society to make sure that this version with our marking, because it's easier to actually push for our government to support or oppose or to introduce new language when you already got hold of the latest draft. And again, this is a leaked draft. Yeah,
พี่เดี๋ยวโทรกลับแป๊บนึงนะพอดีซูมอยู่แป๊บเดียว
so I see I'll go first to Thea and then to Masaki. Yeah, and then we move to TV.
Let me ask also. I haven't talked with Dr. Yupadi yet because I'm so busy these days.
Yeah, we could also have like a side conversation, Dr. P. Orajit, about the Thailand strategy. And then
So I mean, let Dr. Yupadi go ahead. No?
thank you, P. Orajit.
So
Yes.
so
Yeah, but
no need,
Orajit, it
no
would be
need.
good to use this version of the marked document to push to the Thailand government, and then for the Thailand government, different coming from different agencies to talk together to come up with one position to lobby at the UN. Thanks, P. Orajit, and we're happy to have a call on the side with you and with other Thai colleagues. But yeah, Thea, over to you.
Thank you so much for hosting this meeting, colleagues. So from Indonesia, we are in touch with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Health and the State Cabinet. And it seems like there's a disconnection between people who are negotiating in New York and the domestic high-level stakeholders. So, but we are also in touch with, I think, like the staff level from the Permanent Nation of Indonesia in New York. And I think our challenge, and we're quite disappointed as well, hearing
ไม่ยอมว่า
perspectives,
ไม่ยอมว่าอะไร ฮัลโหล ค่ะ
hearing perspectives that human rights
พี่ได้ยิน
issues
ไหม
are issues
พอดี
from
ซูมอ
the
ยู่มันเลยซ้อนกัน พี่ได้ยินไหม
developed countries, and that gender are also languages from the developed countries. So, and this person expressed that there's need to be more languages that is an interest of Indonesia and other developing countries. So it seems like that's why they're quiet on the like human rights and gender related paragraphs or issues. But that's the people in New York, like from under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And sometimes I think we may have a chance when we will be meeting with the state cabinet later this Friday with the three other ministries. And we plan to also express other concerns or perspectives, right? For the tuberculosis declaration in Indonesia, we already translated the political declaration into Bahasa Indonesia from the draft leaked through the CSOs and Communities Coordination Hub from Priyanka and also Robin, yeah. And we had a quick survey and prioritized the paragraphs with the stakeholders in Indonesia, like from a public survey. And we found out that some of the recommended operational paragraphs from the CSOs at the global level and also the communities at the global level are actually of a high priority or high interest from our local non-government stakeholders. And we sent that to the colleagues in New York, but also in the ministries here. And that's how the other domestic policymakers want to follow up on the discussion of this political declaration. And it seems that there's not yet any other CSOs who engage on the other declarations on UHC and PPPR. So I was hoping like maybe at the end of this meeting or within the next few days before Friday, if we can have like key themes or key like highlights on what can we push further through the other policymakers who's actually like the supervisors are the boss of the people who are negotiating in New York, because the state cabinet, they're very close to the presidential office. So just setting the context so that there are things that we can help to follow up.
Thanks, Tia. And at the end of this call, towards the end of this call, we actually want to do a more practical discussion in terms of, okay, we would have content based on the reading and suggestions on the drafts, latest versions of the drafts. But where does it go? And I hope it would answer some of the thoughts that you've raised and the questions that you've raised. But just also to highlight at this point, because the drafts are there, they've moved into versions that already have annotated comments from the member states. At this point, it's already too late, particularly for UHC and TB to still give them a statement, because it would be hard to engage as a member state at this point using a statement, jumping into a draft. What we would want to see is our engagement on the latest version of the drafts already, so that we can push individually and collectively to the member states. And to the member states, you did raise an important issue. Let's discuss that later. When we have a feeling that there's a disconnect, that the mission in New York seems to be moving outside of connection from the capital, what do we do? Because at the end of the day, the capital has the supremacy in terms of determining the position of the countries, and the missions only, support or, like take the position of the country. But yeah, understand that very well. Very quickly, Masaki, Priya, if this is related to TB, if we can move that to TB, otherwise we would also call you on. Just okay. Masaki-san, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much for identifying the Japan's many comments from the government and our government to the zero draft. Yeah, we have the civil society team on the this UHC UHC high level meeting, and so that we will analyze, and we will have the meeting with the Global Health Policy Division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs next week, so that we will ask on this issue, and if there are new information, and we will get back to you. As a Japan's response, civil society response. And we are more cautious about the PPPR and the Japan's input for the PPPR zero draft. Because Japan is very much hardliner on the TRIPS waiver, and so that we need to be more careful about this issue. Yeah, thank you very much.
And like indeed, Japan is a heavy hitter, heavyweight player in most HLMs for the region, especially HLM and PPPR. We would look forward to working with you to make sure, like, if we could build upon. Use the commentaries that we're also trying to gather, building upon the commentaries of global civil society as well. But yep, understood. I think we know the direction where we need to go. Now I pass the floor to Mangala to discuss the TB section.
Hi everyone. I'm going to do this a little bit quickly because we're a little bit behind time. But again, the general analysis I'll share here as we go through the documents as well. So I've done it quite similarly to what already presented earlier. So this document that we have here is from the meeting on the 31st of May. So this is as of 31st May, where the input from the member states have already been captured. So what we have done is we have gone through it and sort of.
So this is the second version, no?
This is the second version. And we have picked up specific ones that we need to be pushing for, and then mostly that, because there's nothing that is too contentious. There's a larger promotion on people-centered approach, human rights, including the role of civil society, multi-led monitoring is mentioned, There's the so the negotiations mainly focused on the PPs. So and then like quite similar to what RD said earlier, a lot of the introductions by or inclusions by Ukraine was opposed by G77, which was China. G77 plus China, which was represented in this one by Cuba and Russia. The US and EU was represented by Romania, and the UK supported most of the Ukraine related edits. So if you go through it, I'll just go through very quickly. So a lot of the points of contentions were around armed conflict. If you can see, whatever Ukraine added on the armed conflicts would be opposed by Russia. And then if you go down a bit more, yeah, so I have included here the specific ones that we need to be supporting for, like in this case, of course, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If you go down a little bit more, yeah, and then this one is the promotion and protection of human rights. Then here there's a strong inclusion of mental health in PP3. Yeah, if you go down a bit more, yeah. Again, this one, yeah, this one is quite interesting actually, because Ukraine wanted to replace academic with burden. So there's that whole, what does it mean to us? Like, you know, burden indicates, I'm not sure, this is something that we probably need to.
It's not an emergency. It's
Yeah,
not like that. It's
yeah,
not so
so-
important.
So that one, and then if you go down a little bit more, this one also I wanted to bring up for as a point of contention here. It talks about representatives of key population groups. It sort of indicates that it's a representation, and in actuality, this should indicate vulnerability of key populations, right? So again, what is our stand on this? These are some of the things that I thought as a group we need to discuss and decide. Agree rated instead of provoked. Sorry, that's just me reacting to Russia. Can we go up and move? Yeah, then there's the gender inclusion here, which again is by Ken's, but most of it is quite supportive. And then we go down a little bit more is the inclusion of mental health again. And then here I think is where we need to include pandemic in order to be aware that based on experience pandemics, because they take away focus from existing diseases, like pandemic is missing here, so perhaps that needs to be something that we need to push for. If we go down, include, yeah, this was a language from the community statement as well, like, that I think we need to include. Can you go down again, Jack? We need to support, yeah, this one, more robust, yeah, I think we need to support this quite strongly.
Bidirectional relationship.
Yeah. If we go down, yeah, this is the whole healthcare and health services. I'm not sure, like, because they want to replace healthcare with, sorry, health services with healthcare. So what is our take on this? Right?
So Mangala, just a note on that. Historically, and this is like over decades of UN language negotiations, health services is stronger, and how do you call that? What's the opposite of progressive? The conservative states always oppose services because they feel that actually has more teeth in committing countries to provide money to provide actual programs and services. Care could be nothing. Yeah.
Can we go down? And then this is another area that we need to support the robust and resilient health system. Again, I think this goes back to one of the positions that was part of our statement. This one, no? We talked about this because we need to ensure that it aligns with our approach to the three HLMs, that it needs to be amplified and strengthened. So this is an important point of entry. Oh yeah, this of course, and it's interesting that it's not even talking about SRHR, it's only talking about SRH, but there's already opposition. But I thought it was interesting that PNG opposes it because, you know, considering that PNG is usually a lot more progressive in this sense. Yeah, but the opposition here is on the words. So again, it's just sexual and reproductive health, not even rights. Can you go down? Sorry. Okay. And then what else? Another entry point, I think, into, so this is the mention of PPPR. Yeah, that okay. This one is just a point on the out-of-pocket expenses. Might be strategic to support this. Oh yeah, this is the one where there was an opposition or on the global fund. I'm not sure why, but I suppose the Russia opposes the mention of global fund here, I believe. So we need to find out why. Sorry. I'm not sure what is it that they're opposing to the mention of global fund, or
Because there's in global fund, and or I think Stop TV should be proud now as well, because they're going into the ranks if they're being opposed by Russia or Vatican. That means they're being seen as promoting or supporting human rights, vulnerable population. So I think this trend is very, very scary that we should oppose.
yeah.
You know, like
Another one here I thought was interesting is this whole to raise domestic revenues and providing financial support bilaterally at regional and global levels, but there's that word upon request towards achieving universal health coverage. So I'm not sure what is our take on the upon request and what does that mean for countries, right? So
delete that, I would suggest.
yeah,
It removes the principle of global solidarity
when you put that
upon request.
But yeah, so that was kind of an interesting point. And then we need to support this, of course, universal health coverage. Yeah, this I included as well. But you can go down. Okay. The investment in care, the prevention of tuberculosis bring some of the largest gains. Yeah, this of course we need to support this. Yeah, this is the opposition to Stop TB partnership, quite in line with the earlier one on global fund. If you go down, important support the social economic determinants here. Can you go down? Yeah. Yeah, we're now only to the OPs. Yeah, this one is quite concerning because they wanted to delete the word urgently. We need to retain that word urgently, right? Because it makes a lot of difference. Can you go down? There is also another one. Yeah, I think will be an important OP for us that needs to be supported. It aligns with own ask, including language and communities. This is quite in line with what we have in our regional statement. This again is an entry point to include. This is one of the process asks that we have in our regional statement on the institutionalization of civil society and community-led monitoring mechanisms. I think this is probably the closest that has been included. So I thought that was interesting.
The regional framework.
Yeah. And then this again an entry point from our statement on the whole of society approach to TB, UC, and PPI. But of course, this is just for TB, but I think that's an important inclusion. Again, we need to support this, especially in our region, since yeah, this I thought was quite interesting because this TB networks, right? So the best entry point would be through the collaboration between HIV and TB. So this is something that has been included here. So I think we need to support this. Going down. Again, the inclusion of course, mental health, and of course here they have put here psychosocial support, which is the larger support. It also includes mental health care. Again, this is another part that aligns very well with our regional ask to strengthen the whole of society approach. Yeah, this one I wasn't too sure about the surveillance part. What does that mean, you know? You see that word there? Yeah, so. And then the next one would, what is this? Yeah. Yeah, this is something that we need to support. Again, this is the financing part, which aligns with our regional ask on international financing as well as domestic resources. These are another key OPs that we need to support for high burden countries in the region. Go down a bit more. Yeah, okay. Yeah, again, this is a key OP. This is for investment to close the gap in funding. This is OP20. This is the whole civil society and affected communities component that I think we need to support. Again, this is something that is related to our regional ask on the reporting and review of progress in the shaping of the tuberculosis research and innovation agenda. Okay, so that is in a nutshell most of the things that, so a lot of things are there. I think for us as a region, it's about focusing on what are the things that we're going to push for and which are the countries that we're going to align ourselves with. There's not been much country, the countries in our region doesn't seem to have said much except for, one second, I forget now. Yeah. Not much, no? Yeah. So any thoughts, any questions?
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Mangala. I think the tricky thing with the TB political declaration in terms of where it is at the moment is that it goes into final reading next week, which is June 20. So for it to be at this stage, because I haven't seen, have you encountered vaccines? Have you encountered community-led services, community-led programs?
Safe community-led vaccines?
So I was just wondering, and I know that Priyanka's hand is raised, and I also see Viorel here, because I'm wondering in between, and we intended to follow as of CASO, but things are happening so fast. Where we would go is actually to go back to the global group working on this and then align forces. But I wonder in between the original zero draft version and this one, what are the big losses that we are actually, because we like, this is like the trees that are crowding us, and then we don't see the forest already. Like, what are the big issues, the big contentious issues that we are not anymore identifying here that we should be alert of, and then be part of the strategy in terms of making sure, okay, we should have at least one country, 2, 3 countries or blocks, making sure that that is the battle that they fight for. So Priyanka, I see your hand, and then Viorel, if you also want to speak and share intelligence and like key points for concern and where we should go for TB at this point. Over to you first, Priya, and then the floor is yours, Viorel. Priya.
Thanks, RD. So just wanted to say that it's for our region, it's important to know that G77 and China are negotiating as a bloc. So in terms of centering in and in terms of focusing, that is where our focus needs to be. Also, I'm just responding to your earlier question. It is it is a little shameful or whatever, but yes, my country has been a little silent, and the community members who have been reaching out to people in the government systems here have not been able to get any inroads as far as my information goes. And in terms of what Thea had mentioned, that we are also hearing a lot from not just in the region, but also globally, that this continues to be a problem, that permanent missions and Ministry of Health are not really communicating with each other and not really having a conversation. So just to be able to facilitate that, and also to be able to ensure that we come across as a unified front, us community members, the coordination hub, just as of yesterday, has launched a zero draft influencing toolkit that's available on our website. And basically what it has is a template letter and a key essentials document that not only takes on from the region's statement on the 3 HLM, but also takes on from the key asks document that was prepared by all the community members and Stop TB Partnership, and also the executive summary of the Deadly Divide 2.0. And it basically reflects on what are the most absolute essentials that we want to see in the political declaration. And we've divided them in 5 sub-points, and there is a precedence and a particular logic as to why we are demanding for these five highlight key asks. So I'm just wanted to share info and intel around this influencing toolkit that is available now, and it is in its 2nd edition, and I'm happy to share the link for that in the chat box. And in case there are any other questions, I am available on the call.
Priya, thank you. And yeah, I mean, we have to go back to the efforts of the global group in terms of consolidating strategies, no? But I really believe, especially for TB, when the country partners are at the point of needing to provide specific guidance or requests or points, advocacy points, asks to their capitals, to their member states, it has to be vis-a-vis the current version of the draft. At this point, if, for example, Asia Pacific countries haven't been engaging, they wouldn't engage given a KIAS document anymore. They would engage either to the current version of the draft, either to support language that's already there, or if we're able to identify brave new countries coming on board that would split from G77, it's a matter of introducing, like what are the critical language. So like, for example, which country, it doesn't have to be from the region, would protect all the references to Global Fund, to Stop TB, which countries would push for the missing language, let's say on vaccines, if it's indeed not there, it's there if it's there, okay. Or whatever key as in the key as document that is there but is not here, but particularly where to put it, like very practical language suggestions already, rather than like this is where the version is and then this is the statement. It's quite like I'm just imagining it in my head at this point. That would not be so easy as a tool, as a guidance. And we know this because when some of our partners from the country or some government partners are actually approaching us, the most specific recommendations, the most specific suggestions, language, either support, oppose, add, is the language that they would be able to act upon. There's no more, because of the timing also, there's no more bandwidth for, okay, these are the principles that we want to see, and then, okay, see how you insert that. Yeah, over. Viorel.
Thank you, thanks, RD, and good afternoon, everyone. Absolutely agree with you, RD. And indeed, Priyanka mentioned already that we are in touch with the Civil Society Coordination Hub and work very closely with all this stuff. The key essentials were very useful at the stage when we moved from zero draft to the next draft and so on. And I agree with you, RD. Now using it is quite late. I mean, it's like it's the final negotiation are coming next week, basically. So we have just only a few days in a way to influence. And here I would like to kind of like mention in terms of practical points, if you are in contact with your country missions or with the ministers of health or with the ministers of external affairs or anybody else who is engaged in this process, at this stage, I guess it is important just to communicate simple things without going into big explanations. What is it? Just to say, if you support the addition made by, for example, Canada and New Zealand, or addition made by EU, or addition made by other country that we all agree, then it's very helpful. It's just, even for those countries that are not very active in all negotiations, it is important for them to know to support this or to reject it. So it's we did this exercise, and I guess we will have a draft later today to be considered, where we included some suggestions based on all, on the paragraphs basically of the document, where we are saying it's important to support this addition or to object around another addition, or to object to those who delete it, and so on. So this has been done basically, and I guess we will have this list later today. So it would be good that my feeling is that it will be distributed through the CS coordination hub as well. So we'll have it hands. Please use this in further kind of like interacting with the country missions in New York, but also with other stakeholders. In terms of the critical kind of like missing, what we, for example, observed since the previous draft and this draft, we lost totally the CRG action plans. It was in a previous version, but somehow, and we still don't understand how this happened, an entire paragraph disappeared. It's not there that it's deleted by somebody and so on. It's just not there. So we are trying now to push back that language. Other than that, more or less issues just to, in a way, as I said, support or object different additions or cuts from the document by different countries. Oh, and the last point, as we already see, basically we have two groups there, right? So we see quite an objection around CRG, human rights, gender, and everything else by Russia, G77, and Holy See and others. So it's we can say it's a already formed group, and we see from other side, EU, US, Canada, New Zealand, Ukraine, very proactive to include community rights and gender aspects in that document. So basically, overall, we should agree with one group and object to another. So that what in general I would mention. I will stop here and back to you, RD. Thank you.
Thanks, Virel. We were just whispering here and realized Africa region, we just realized has been quiet, no? Like for TV and for UHC so far, that is quite surprising, because generally they tend to be, operate as a block. But one. So Virel, just a clarification, there is going to be released sometime tonight, as per what you know so far, the third draft or the third version of the political declaration with comments from member states. Is that what's happening tonight?
Yeah, this is what I heard, but I cannot confirm.
Yeah, so that would be excellent to have. And then if it goes to the coordination group, civil society coordination group for TV, indeed it would be good to market like support, oppose, and then to see if any language has dropped that we really care about, and then work from there. And then countries or regions, this is the last hurrah for TB, given the late stage in terms of, identifying some countries to protect some language. And even if like G77, it's a block, but if, for example, in UHC, actually individual countries are speaking outside of G77. So let's see if we can do that for TB as well. Like thanks Viorel. But yeah, I don't know
And
how.
maybe to add,
Go
Ardi,
ahead,
just
Viorel. Go ahead.
I forgot to mention to what Priyanka said in terms of the key essentials document that have been developed. For now, we also work together on developing a kind of like a pager of some key terminology, kind of like a little bit to explain in human language what does it mean. CRG, why it is needed, what human rights barriers to services and so on, just for people, to understand more, because what we observed also, a lot of country missions in New York, they were agnostic in a way in terms of all these terms. So we also developed a pager for this, and it will be attached to the document that I mentioned. Thank you.
Viral and Priya, a quick question before we move into PPR, a temperature check, because we've dived into the details of the language, but overall, how do you feel about the current status of the language of the political declaration for TB? Are you still waiting to see how it gets finalized? Are you disappointed? I mean, it's just like there's so many moving pieces, or still have to see because it's still not final, no?
But it's still not, and it's not ideal in a way. A lot of things like big things.
Something much more progressive, no?
Absolutely, I would agree with Viorel that when the first draft came in, that itself was a bit of a shock because it was in many ways than one a regression from 2018. And there were very big chunks from 2018 that were strong language that were completely missing from this draft. So it has been a very difficult journey in terms of influencing and in terms of reaching to country representatives to have the language that we want in there. But one has to be hopeful, I suppose.
Thanks, Priya and Viral. Yeah, what is actually sad for me, different from UHC, in TB, I only see the developed regions and countries being progressive. The people from the global south are actually being what's the term? Regressive. Conservative, no? I mean, at least in UHC, like you would have like Pakistan, you would have Mexico, but here it's just really EU, CANS who are pushing for progressive language, which is a shame, no? And then G77 is again more shameful, and then Africa is quiet. Yeah, South Africa. South Africa is usually a champion, but yeah, let's see how we can. Priyanka, you want to have a shout out in terms of the next call of the TB coordinating group?
Thank you so much, RD. Yes, absolutely. We convene at the same time every second Thursday and the fourth Thursday of the month at 2 p.m. CET. So our next call is 22nd of June. 2 p.m. CET, and the link will be available in the chat to register if you haven't already registered, or you can go over to.
Yeah, you don't want to move it a bit earlier because that's already the final reading. I mean, just a suggestion, you don't have to answer now. Just in terms of if you want, I don't know, have the energy to do a last effort.
No, we did discuss about it. But the point is that we also want to like reserve people's energies because sometimes calls become too much. But we are always available and happy for impromptu calls and discussions. In case you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the coordination hub. We are always here to support.
Yeah, and kudos to the coordinator. But it's true, like between all the demands of reading through the documents, engaging, needing to reach out, plus all the other work that's happening and everything happening so fast, it's like a whirlwind of, yeah. But anyway, over to you, Jeff. I hope we have like more promising let's see, news for us. Now we shift to PPPR.
Thanks, RD. And for the PPPR HLM, be conscious of the time. I'll try to cover everything in the next 10 minutes. So this is the zero draft of the Pandemic Prevention, Preparedness, and Response Political Declaration. Compared to TB and UHC, this will be the first high-level meeting on PPPR, which is timely given that within the World Health Assembly, through the intergovernmental negotiating body, there's also an ongoing negotiations to adopt a pandemic instrument, which is a legally binding document. So this zero draft is shorter compared to the first two, considering that this hasn't been undergone negotiations yet. The negotiations is taking place in New York since yesterday and will continue to today. The first compilation will be out based on their calendar on the 21st of June, which is next week. So this entire draft is summarized in 14 pages, containing 29 preambular paragraphs and then 46 operational paragraphs. Overall, in terms of the principles, it covers the foundation of health, which is primary health care, consistent to what is being called upon in UHC. There's this new terminology, which is the whole of society and whole of government approach that was introduced in 2021 by Dr. Tedros to encapsulate that the addressing a pandemic needs more holistic and multi-sectoral approach. What we are happy about as of CASO is that in this zero draft, there's a recognition of people's participation and participation of vulnerable populations, including women and specific populations also. We'll go through that very quickly later. There's also the recognition of the One Health approach, the intersections between people's health, animal health, and plant health, in a way recognizing climate change as influential in future pandemics that the world will be facing. And there's also a number of PPs and OPs focusing on health workers, specifically women health workers. What is really the most contentious part, and I think the central contentious issue of debate of the PPPR of the PPPR political declaration, is the issue around national sovereignty, depending on the national capacity to respond to pandemics and future pandemics, relying heavily on the national level capacity, and disconnecting that from international cooperation. And there's also recognition and also proposals to share technology and technical know-how, adopt and approve establishment of regional mechanisms, but then the how part, which will be laid out more extensively in the pandemic instrument, is only referenced here. So the debate around those aspects is not clarified very well in this current draft. So we really have to refer back to the pandemic instrument, wherein, as some of you already know, these specific areas are being heavily discussed and debated among the global north and global south countries. So let me go very quickly in some of the comments that we've gathered so far as a CASO. And again, as mentioned earlier, we will be sharing this draft so that we can provide additional inputs. In the PP part, there's already a recognition that COVID-19 has reversed years of progress. I looked at this specific reference. It didn't mention existing pandemics such as HIV, TB, and malaria. But under provision 12 and 15, there's a recognition that current efforts to address existing health issues have been reversed due to COVID pandemic, and that there are existing disruptions that has been caused by COVID. There's also a recognition that health is a precondition for and outcome indicators of 3 dimensions, so that multi-sectoral, multi-dimensional aspect in addressing health in the context of the pandemic is recognized. I put this in yellow because it's good that it tackled health inequities and inequalities. But then again, as a PP, it's good as a guidance, but you really have to again reflect on the OP, whether this will be operationalized as a commitment. There are also, again, like what I said earlier, there's heavy references to the role of women and focus on women's issues within the context of pandemic. We had a number of studies already around the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic to women. So it's really good that it's reflected in this zero draft. There's also, again, like what I mentioned earlier, the focus on the entire health workforce and also the protection and also the strengthening of the entire health workforce as part of building strong and resilient health systems. Then again, as I mentioned, the primary health care, which is the foundation of UHC and also now being referred to in the context of the pandemics. Again, the mention of One Health is also here. This one, they also recognize people-centered health systems, which also we referred and we raised as part of our key asks in the 3 HLM civil society and community statement in our March meeting in Jakarta. There's a good recognition of the impact of pandemics in mental health and well-being. And if you go through the OP part, there's also specific commitment to ensure that mental health services are being provided in time of pandemics. Some of the other areas I'm already skipping, but please do have a closer look as well. The call to action the call to action section is divided into 4 sections. So that's equity, governance, overarching health issues, and financing, and then the follow-up part. In the equity part, so there's a mention that there's a call for equity, social justice, and social protection mechanisms, which is aligned to our 3 HLM statement, and also addressing elimination of root causes of stigma and discrimination, but only limited to healthcare. So I included the other settings that have been mentioned in the UNAIDS reference in terms of addressing stigma and discrimination. I also noticed when we were discussing the UHC and also the TB drafts of the political declaration, that there's a language there being used where it mentions populations with intersecting, with populations experiencing intersecting forms of stigma and discrimination. It wasn't mentioned here. I think that's actually a good entry point to include the mention of criminalized populations such as sex workers, transgender populations, and even more or less sometimes migrants. So it's not currently mentioned in this 0 draft. It would be nice to note. This is the part where it mentions the different populations, given that there's already some references to it from other existing UN documents, with the exception of people with TB. We all know in previous studies and also the reports that we did that people with TB have had disruptions in terms of access to medicine, especially those undergoing treatment. So I think it would be good to mention it here. There are languages that mostly use ensure rather than commit to in the OP file, so that's something that we really have to pick up. In terms of the health workers, they focus only on gender responsive, which I think as a new language, this is progressive already. But again, a major lack in terms of language use in this entire 0 draft is the use of rights-based, rights-affirming languages. So you'll see very few references to human rights. It needs to be included. Again, like I mentioned earlier, there's more focus towards women, but my assumption is very focused on cisgender women. So this is the operational language is being used in other UN platforms and debates. So I think this is something that we can also use, given that this entire OP is a new language. Again, the references of women, it would be also good to, again, go back to the actual references, because when I check on this specific OP, it did mention women's leadership, but it somehow deleted this, it removed this entire phrase on ensuring full, equal, and meaningful participation of women, which I think is stronger than just mentioning leadership, women's leadership. It's in this particular OP too, but it was removed here. So I find it interesting as to why. Again, the references on sexual and reproductive health and rights is here, which is actually good. But then again, the reference focuses on the Beijing platform and also ICTD. Just highlighted these two, OP 12 and 13, really focuses on TRIPS and the flexibilities of TRIPS in the protection of public health and human rights, especially in the rights of developing countries to produce generics during the time of pandemic. These two are already considered very strong, so really have to protect these two OPs. It also mentions use of innovative incentives for private sector to develop and share through transparent partnership, development of drugs, even sharing pathogens in the time of pandemics. But then again, the how part of how to put in place innovative incentives, which is being debated in the pandemic instrument, needs to be relooked at again. You'll see in the next coming 3 OPs, the use of words appropriate, where possible. These are the languages that's peppered through the entire 0 draft. These are very small languages, but what this means is the countries are free to decide, depending on their capacity on what to do. And that's a major drawback of this 0 draft. It's you can find it all through different OPs. What is lacking though is how we can leverage the existing capacity and advances of the global north countries to share their technology and know-how to global south countries, which is not very explicit in many of these OPs. If you can just give me five more minutes. So in terms of global governance, again, like I mentioned earlier, there's this motherhood statement of strengthening international collaboration and coordination. But then if you look at this OP 18, which is a new language, it's very thin and it doesn't really explain how you strengthen collaboration. Will it be through incentives? Will it be through establishment of mechanisms? Will it be through establishment of regional manufacturing mechanisms and other hubs, for instance, that is being proposed already through other means. So it's not very clear. Again, the use of language in accordance to specific contexts, again, peppered. Under leadership, there's also, again, reaffirming the importance of national ownership, which I think is good. But this entire OP actually strengthens the use of national sovereignty, which means that you're putting too much independence to countries to decide on themselves without any support needed from other countries. This is really scary for me, given that the country can just say that it will really depend on them on how will they implement a pandemic
Especially in the
response.
context of pandemics,
Especially in the
where
context
there's
of
no
pandemics.
borders.
Yeah. So it doesn't really reflect the whole of society, whole of government approach that is being put in the PP. Then again, the appropriateness, whole of action. Sorry, I forgot to mention also that under the national ownership, there's a mention of surveillance here. In our 3 HLM statement, we did mention that communities need to be included in the surveillance activities as part of the early responders at the country level. But now the surveillance in the context of the zero draft pertains to government-led surveillance. So just to take a note of that. This is actually very good because this is our first key ask in our HLM statement for countries to develop their own national agenda on PPPR, of which many countries, especially in Asia Pacific, don't have yet. I mean, we do have the PPP or the COVID-19 pandemic plans, which contains 10 items, but in the context of PPPR, we don't have. Many countries don't have it yet. On OP26, it's about strengthening objectives, monitoring the results and actions of the PPPR at the country level, but there's no mention of using or leveraging existing intergovernmental and regional mechanisms. May it be political, such as ASEAN or APEC, or other UN intergovernmental mechanisms to review the progress. Again, the use of the languages of relevant. This particular OP pertains to the participation of the people's participation in pandemic response. But the use of language relevant stakeholder is quite unclear. What we included in our 3 HLM statement is that the most vulnerable population should be included. Remember the PP earlier with specific populations. It's not quite clear here. And relevant can also mean so many things. It can mean big pharma can participate in the governance process. Military can participate, of which in contrast doesn't reflect the experiences based on the reports, especially of experiences of criminalized populations like LGBTIQ populations, sex workers, etc. Again, the surveillance activities, it's not clear how it's not indicated here on how populations can be involved in the surveillance, and actually also included decision making. Sorry, I think this is in green supposed to be, not in black. I don't know, for some reason they're in green. So these are my additions, actually, not black.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then again, this OP29 is focused on health workers. It mentions all forms of violence, but does not mention gender-based violence. So it would be good to include that. Unless the assumption is no.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. OP32 is about misinformation, especially in social media platforms. So it's good that it's there. Moving to the third component, the overarching health-related issues. Again, the inclusion as part of the preparedness early warning systems, but it's not clear whether populations would be included there. OP36 focuses on innovative technologies, but including telemedicine and cost-effective technologies, but also focusing on COVID-19 pandemic. So I added future pandemics as well, because as we all know, we thought COVID-19 was the last pandemic, but monkeypox happened, so it's not the last pandemic yet. So maybe use other future pandemics for inclusion. There's a mention here in OP37 of the inclusion of community-based services, but community-led services are not recognized. Almost there. So in terms of financing and investment, it's good that they're mentioning expanded pooling of resources for domestic resources, having innovative mechanisms to pull funding for the PPPR at the country level. But in terms of technology sharing pathogens, technological know-how, it's not quite clear how countries or intergovernments would be implemented. Again, the mention of national context and priorities is there. And last but not the least, in terms of the follow-up, we don't have anything very stark in here, except that it was mentioned that the next the next high-level meeting on PPPR after the 2023 one would be 2026, which is it's going to go through a 3-year cycle as opposed to the existing ones, which is in a 4-year cycle for UHC and 5 years for TB and HIV. I think that's it for now. If anyone has any questions or comments, any impressions on PPPR. One of the things that I realized is that some of the languages that is being used in TB and UHC are quite similar. For example, the mention of vulnerable populations are there.
So they would
that's something
face
that
the same opposition or support.
and it's the same member states.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see in next week's compilation whether the same countries would have same positions on many.
Jeff, thank you for raising that, because I just realized the language of the zero drafts are coming from the same whatever ink, same pattern. And I'm thinking if TB, we lose on TB on a particular language, then we would lose on UHC, we would lose on PPPR. And it's a cause of panic because we have so little room now to actually steer TB. For PPPR, it would also be worth noting that there's a lot of space for introducing new language. And this is something that would really be catching the eye of a lot of governments, because usually in political declarations, you refer to old commitments, either legally binding or not legally binding. Here, everybody would want to, the conservatives would want to be conservative, the progressives would want to be progressive. It would be good too if as civil society we could also already insert specific language that's still missing. To me, I feel one, this is a very heteronormative language, like it's always women, which we support, but not in the, in all their diversity. It's as if like there's only men and women. It's very, very, how they call this, blind, or it doesn't mention people of diverse sexuality, which I do understand, but it could still be put there. I think it could also still be strengthened in references on engagement of community, leadership of community. It's for something that is so instrumental and that really affects the most vulnerable communities, and where the solution lies a lot on communities, as we all know. It's very shallow and thin. It doesn't really give us something. It's as if it's country owned, which is fine, but it doesn't spell out. It has a lot of references to the role of healthcare workers, which is well and fine. But again, the community response, support for community engagement, community leadership is not there. I don't know how happy we are in terms of the resonance within the draft and the overarching principles of our statement. Gender transformative, this is still a conservative one. Like it's women focused, but not the broader, gender transformation. Human rights, you already said that it's really weak on human rights language. Mention of vulnerable populations, there is in the overarching principle, the PP, but not in the OP. Community leadership is also very, very weak. People-centeredness and equity, I think, is also like in passing. So I think we're starting quite weak. Like there's nothing that would jerk our knees, like, okay, it's so worrying, but it's actually like a very blah. No? That's how I feel, which is like, anyone else engaging in pandemic discussion, having an initial read so far of how they feel? Asaki-san, what's your temperature check? How happy, how mad are you with the current version?
Yeah, sorry. I have not led the zero draft. Precisely. Thank you very much for the one by one presentation, Jeff and RD. And but anyway, so I need to read it very carefully about it, and also it at a glance, and it has very much similarity with the the current draft of the pandemic treaty INB document. So we need to work work as the the alignment on the advocacy for the this PPPR high level meeting, as well as the international intergovernmental negotiation body of the pandemic treaty on so that anyway, so I will feedback to you and feedback to you soon. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. There's a question or a comment by Taimu.
I wish to hear about the trip section if people have any specific opinions.
It seems generally okay, no?
Generally, yeah, it's relatively strong at the moment.
Yeah. Sorry, Taimu, if we are whispering, but we are just discussing that for us as APCASO, we're generally satisfied with the current reference to TRIPS because it does put in all the protection that currently exists.
But we are aware of the contentions and debates that we anticipate around OP 13 and 14.
Yeah, currently it's good for us as the zero draft, but we already know, and this is where our allies in the other political declaration could actually be our opponents for TRIPS, because this is usually for the developed for global north, global south, producer countries. Anything else? How happy are we in terms of surfacing or the draft document surfacing interconnections between TBUHE and PPPR? Jeff, did you see that happening or being reflected strongly enough? The way that we have in the statement, TB is mentioned here, no?
TB is mentioned.
UHC is also mentioned.
It's cross-cutting.
But in here, it's mentioned enough.
TB is not mentioned here.
But it can be strengthened now. So those are the things that we could still watch out for, because like PPPR is the document that we still have a lot of ground in terms of. This is at the moment 0-0. We could still pass on new language, red, black, or yellow to the partners. We still have room to influence this. We need like 1, 2, 3 countries who would champion some languages, protect some languages, champion introducing of new languages. There's still an opportunity.
I just want to mention, RD, that I do like what Masaki mentioned. For those who are interested to participate, at least have a read through of the PPPR zero draft, and to also read the INB Bureau version of the pandemic instrument, because currently the negotiations of the 5th INB is ongoing. They're looking at a 200-page version already, consolidating all the different statements from the different member states. And there will be alignments there, especially when they engage here. What my concern is the PPPR the negotiations will take place in New York. The INB is taking place in Geneva. So this will be two different sets of people. But it seems like the divide with UHC and PB would be different with PPPR, given that it's more or less a debate between the global north and global south countries, especially around manufacturing, sharing of technical know-how, and compulsory licensing issues.
Thanks, Jeff. If the time in the computer is correct, we have 4 minutes. So let's use these 4 minutes in terms of, okay, where do we go from here? Let's talk one by one. Again, for TV, it's the last hurrah. What we will do is we will wait for that latest version that Viorel shared is likely to be released tonight. We would work as a CASO and connect with the global groups with the TV coordination hub. I guess our role is really to mark red, black, or yellow, and then push that to the country partners for any last level efforts. I think for our region, Mongolia is one of the countries where we could see just in terms of the relationship of our civil society partner to the group. That's where we're intending to go with TB, and Priya will get in touch with the coordination group for that. For UHC, I think at this point we would finish our marking of the red, yellow, and black of the current version, because this is a version that would undergo the next round by next week. What we would do for any groups, and we would email again the Jakarta group, the Jakarta participants, when we have a version, and if anybody also wants to join the marking of the UHC latest draft, do let us know, but we would share that in the Jakarta group with instructions of how to push for the language how they call this, specific practical tips of where to go with that language and where to offer that. We would also be working with some government countries that are approaching us for requests on language suggestions to take as a country. So there's some opening for influence on UHC. For PPPR, Jeff, where do you see this going?
We compilation one next week.
But can we know, before we even see compilation one, what we already do, should we already forward that to the global group? Or do we wait for the compilation? We shouldn't know, because should we wait?
No, I think if
This one, no, this is early enough.
already, and then,
No? I think what we would do is from the Jakarta group, call on for people that would want to focus on PPPR. Call those who want to focus, meaning the lobbying to UHC, and then call those who still believe there's still an opening to actually try to influence TB given the tight time frame. So that's one in terms of the individual language. But where this goes, APCASO in partnership with country and civil society, community partners in the region actually put together an engagement roadmap with regards to the 3 high-level meetings, highlighting or culminating in September 2023, but even beyond. We were planning actually to hold a follow-up meeting process to the Jakarta consultation that puts together a small group of Asia-Pacific countries partnering civil society and specific key government representatives. We were planning to do that in early June, and we were looking at Thai government partners to facilitate and to host that meeting. It's harder, as you can imagine, to commit a government agency to do that, and it's taken longer for us to land at a date. Now we have it, it's happening in July, early July. Now we have the commitment of the Thai National Health Security Office to hold that. We have the funding also coming from the French government. So what we would do is that at the point when we meet in July, first week of July, whatever version of the political declaration draft that we have, at least for UHA and PPPR, we would undergo like a reading with the government representatives in that meeting, in that meeting in Bangkok in July, so that we'll be able to have a more effective more effective interventions as either a regional bloc or a specific countries for UHE and for PPPR, and we'll also see what can we do wherever TB outcome document lands by that time. So I think this is where we are at the moment. And again, like we would reach out to the country partners that we know have the capacity, have the interest, and have the network with the government entities to be able to try to influence the language. Otherwise, please do reach out to the staff team if you have a particular interest to be involved in the checking of the language, either in one or across the three political declarations. Yep. Any questions from the group? It's the end of our meeting date. And thank you for staying through. I see Achut will reach out to you for mobilization in Nepal, of course. Masaki, definitely as well. Thea from Indonesia. Ives, we hope you will be able to forward to us and do work with us for particular language on mental health, especially for UHG and PPPR. There's still space for it. There have been references to mental health, but maybe there could be stronger language. And I think mental health is an area that there's not much contention. So we could actually create new language that would set a precedent for future political declarations. Yeah. Yeah, but otherwise, Priya will also reach out to you. Apologies, we've been quiet with all the things that we have to juggle. Yeah, but I think this is where we could stop from now, unless there's any further shout out or request from anybody from the group. If none, we end here. Thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I could imagine how TB feels now.